all the way down. Good morning. You are watching KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. This is the Weekend Boost, and I am your host, Paul Lane. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. It's an honor to have you here. We just got past our big 4th of July weekend, and there's a lot of discord in this country going on, and it's a good time to be patriotic. It's a good time to feel good about America. And today we're going to talk about some pretty interesting stuff. My show slogan is "Everyone's looking for a hero, and if you can't find one, be one." I found a hero, man. I tell you guys, this is a hero. Jose Aguayo has put together this book, The Color of Duty, and it is the stories of Latinos in the American military. A must-own book. I mean, this book is just eye-opener. And a lot of these heroes that he talks about in this book all are from the Denver metro area, so we're not talking about people from far away. This is people that actually walk in the streets that you walk on. So, excellent book. We're going to be talking about that today. Before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to the people of Los Rosales Restaurant in Sedona, Arizona. I was in there on vacation last week, week before last, and man, I left my debit card there. And man, they were gracious enough to when they found it. I called them, and they hadn't found it. And they called me later, and they said, "Hey, we got your debit card," and man, they dropped it in the mail. I took it home, and they mailed it to me, and I was able to not lose a dime, and not a minute of sleep, and it was so nice. But not only that, the food was wonderful. So, by the way, also Sedona, Arizona, guys, if you have never been, you have got to, in your lifetime, go there. I mean, it's magical. Maybe one of these days I'm going to put an entire show together on this place because it's really, truly magical. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Shout out to Calma, the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors. If you are a young author, old author, if you're someone who's looking for mentorship, leadership, some help with writing an article, a book, the mentorship through this program is second to none. And if you'd like to reach out, please reach out to us at the station. Calma, do you know the website of Calma? It's I believe it's calma.org.
I believe so. I'm positive.
Okay, but like I say, if you're interested at all, this is a booming organization. It's a growing organization. It gives me much pride to be in the presence of the people of Calma, because I'm just so excited to see the intellect and the leadership and the pride and the community commitment, and it just really was a wonderful thing. And so with that, guys, let's go ahead and get started talking about this book, The Color of Duty. Well, Jose, this book is just to sit down and read it, I almost feel chills because as a veteran, I was very proud to see people that were brown that were serving my country who looked like me, and you really put an effort together to make this book. What inspired you to do this?
Okay, well, I'm a veteran myself. I served with the 82nd Airborne Division from 1959 to 1962. For those of you that aren't aware of military history, that was between the Korean War and the Vietnam War. After that, after my when I was serving, it occurred to me that people of color, the military was still very segregated at that time, even though President Truman had signed an executive order in 1954 ordering that the military be desegregated. But it took a long time, for that to actually happen. So when I was there, I noticed that there were very few Latino officers. And all my life, when I was growing up, I wanted to attend West Point and become an officer. But for a young Mexicano growing up in a small northeastern Colorado town in the late 50s, there was just no way that I could get a nomination to attend West Point. So I joined the military, the regular military, served for those 3 years, and Latinos were kind of in a no man's land. You know, I served at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and before that I was in Augusta, Georgia, at signal school to learn radio repair. And you know, everywhere you went, there were still, you know, white restrooms, colored restrooms, white restaurants, colored restaurants, white water fountains, colored water fountains. And being brown, I didn't know which way to go. You know,
Oh man.
I would go to the. I think, well, I'm more in tune with the black Americans, so I'll go to their places, and they would tell me, no, man, you belong over there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd go to the white ones, and you know, you weren't prohibited from going into the white entrance in the theater or something like that, but you felt uncomfortable. You know, they never told you anything.
Mm.
In fact, when I finished basic training and drove to Georgia with a friend of mine from Pueblo, we stopped in Arkansas, Fort Smith, Arkansas, to get a little something to eat. So we went into a restaurant, sat down. Nobody told us we couldn't go in, but we sat there and we were talking. Other people were coming in, white people, and they were serving them, and they'd get their food, finish and go out, and we hadn't been served yet. We hadn't even been asked what we wanted. So we finally got the idea, and we got up and left. But it was still a very segregated military at that point, in the South especially. And I finished my tour of duty, got out, and much later in my life, I had the opportunity through a fellowship with Colorado Latino Age Wave to do a project, and that was focused on Latinos over age 50 and in the metro area. And I thought, well, you know, this is the opportunity to do a book about Latinos in the military that had gone unrecognized, you know, over the years, except for a handful that happened to overcome obstacles and did become officers and did achieve some notoriety. But through this fellowship, I decided to do the book, The Color of Duty, and I interviewed 48 Latinos, veterans of the Second World War, the Korean War, and Vietnam War. Had a great time interviewing them. A lot of them had not talked about their military service to anyone, not even their families. And you may or may not know, you know, they were severely traumatized, or they wanted to put these memories behind them, and they didn't talk about it. But because I was a veteran, I guess they could relate to me, and they opened up and told me some very interesting stories. So I ended up putting 34 of these stories into this book, The Color of Duty, and it was very well received. I entered it in the International Latino Book Awards competition, and it got a second place award. Very well received by most people. A lot of people were asking me, is there going to be a volume 2? You know, because there's many more veterans that we know of, you know, in Colorado and throughout the nation that need to have their stories told. But it was hard work doing this, and I'm probably too old to do a second volume, but you never know.
It's so interesting when you talk about that. I remember in 1977 when I went to the Army, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and all my life I have been kind of, you know, I was in the middle of two worlds because I had an Anglo last name and I was brown, you know, and so I was in the Chicano neighborhood, and it was like, hey, you're not welcome here. And then I went to the Chicanos, you're not welcome here. So I was like this guy without a country. So when you talk about that, it comes to life for me. I remember going to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and going in the mess hall, and they said, you know, there's some guys, and all of a sudden this guy said, he's a white dude or something. And I go, I'm not a white guy, you know? And it was like an insult for us when we were kids to be called white. And, you know, I can't explain why. That was just how, you know, the way we were raised. And it was such an awakening to realize that, you know, to everyone else, I was just another white guy, you know? And, you know, same thing, mess halls, you know, it was just weird. I remember one time that someone come by and say, why are you always hanging with the black guys, you know, white guys? And the white guy said, the black guy says, why are you hanging with the white guys? I said, man, What can I say, man?
I'm not sure where I should be. You know.
So when you said that, it really hit home for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So, when you went in, I'm sure there were a lot of World War II veterans that were there to kind of lead you, mentor you, or was that the case for you?
Not so many World War II veterans. They were pretty much gone by then, but there were Korean War veterans in my unit, and they didn't really relate too much about their service. Vietnam had not yet happened. I was very young when I went in. I was 17 when I joined, and I was too immature, I guess, to think about the world scene. I had no idea that we were even considering, going into Vietnam, and it actually didn't begin in a large scale until 1965 after I got out. But when I was in there, they were sending special forces advisors in to work with the indigenous tribes, but I didn't know about any of this. Just before I got out, I had an opportunity. Our platoon sergeant, I'm actually platoon leader, he was a warrant officer, came up to me in formation and offered me a chance to go to Officers Candidate School, and I considered it for a moment, and then I decided, no, I really want to get out and go to art school. So I told him I wasn't interested. And actually, it probably was just a ploy to get me to re-enlist. I don't think he was serious about it at the time, but nevertheless, that was an opportunity I had, to be an officer. Also, after basic training, I scored highest in all of the proficiency tests except the marksmanship portion. I could not hit the target when I was shooting my M1, and they finally realized that I needed glasses, so they sent me to get some glasses. And after that, I did do okay with that part. But when our company graduated from basic training, they pulled me out of formation, put me up in front of the commanding officer. He was a Colonel Jump, and he asked me what I wanted to do in the military. And I was young and scared. First time I'd ever been in front of a colonel, and so I just told him, well, I enlisted to become a paratrooper, and so that was that. But I should have told him, well, sir, I want to be an officer like you. And I probably would have had a chance to go to OCS then, but it never happened. Destiny, I guess, pulls you the way you're meant to go.
Supposed to go, yeah.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that it was kind of a dream to go to West Point at one time.
Yes.
So when he mentioned that, did you, I can't imagine, you must have really been torn inside.
I was, but I didn't really know how to respond. I was just immaturity, and not being in front of that kind of authority before. I was just a nameless private at that time, so yeah.
Now, within the ranks of the military, and we're going to get to the book, but I want to kind of get a little bit of feedback, just a little bit of background on you. Did you experience discrimination within the ranks? I know not within the communities, but within the Army. Was there prejudice? Was there racism there, or was it more of blending, and was it kind of erased when you were with the troops?
It wasn't any overt racism, but there were small incidences. I was a model soldier, I think, and my peers thought so too. And I always, my boots were always spit shined, my brass was shined, my uniforms were totally heavily starched, and we'd have to go into formation, to decide who was going to serve guard duty on a particular night, and there was one person, that would be deemed an orderly for the night, so didn't have to pull guard duty, and this was up to the discretion of the company commander. And even though, to everybody else, I should have been a no-brainer, to select me to be orderly. I was always overlooked, and they'd pick somebody else for that. And just small things like that. But Other than that, there was no real overt discrimination that I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I rose in ranks pretty quick. I was an E5 within 2 years of being in the military, and that was pretty unusual. But still never able to break out, and part of it was probably my fault, as I related, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't mature enough to see the opportunities when they were presented. So
Mm-hmm. So did you did 3 years and got out, got your honorable, and yeah, me too. I said, that's enough military for me. It's so interesting because kind of a parallel for me was I went in right after Vietnam. And when I was getting ready to get out, they took the hostages in Iran in '79. So I was right in that peacetime era. So it was a much different mindset, you know, comparatively, you know, to wartime. But there was a lot of racism going on. I remember when I went to basic training in Fort Dix, we had a great big meeting, and you know, the post commander came out and he said, you know, you are all green. There's no black, there's no white. You're green. You're all green. You know, and that's the mentality that we got. You know, and we really did learn to gel as a unit when we, you know, I was 17 like you, and it was a real eye opener because, you know, I didn't realize the big racial divide in the country, you know, even, you know, at that time. And so much has stayed the same and much has changed.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. The closest I came to seeing any combat was in 1961. This was, of course, the Cold War era, and the 82nd Airborne Division was a first response organization. We always had to have one battle group ready to go anywhere in the world in 24 moments notice, 24-hour moments notice. So in July of 1961, there was what they called the Berlin crisis.
Mm-hmm.
The Soviets were threatening to cut off access to Berlin that was in the Soviet zone, and so they put us on alert. This was early in the morning, and we got up, went down to Pope Air Force Base, where we loaded on our airplanes for jumps, and got there, and they issued us parachutes and live ammunition, a tube of 3 hand grenades, and gave us some shots, and had us fill out our insurance beneficiary forms.
Mm-hmm.
And all that, and
It gets real, man.
it was seeming to be real then. So we loaded on the planes with our parachutes on, and we waited there with the motors running, and after about an hour, I think they said, they told us to stand down. I guess they had solved the crisis diplomatically, so we didn't have to go, but that's the closest I got to any kind of combat.
Yeah, that was, I remember the night that they took the hostages in Iran, we had a big muster formation. There was the whole post at Fort Carson, and we were in this great big field. It's called, I think, Soldiers Field, and we were all standing at attention. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and they said Iraq has just declared war on the United States. I don't even, vaguely, you know, and I was in the combat unit, 1st of the 10th Infantry, so the 101st Airborne, 82nd Airborne, and then the 1st of the 10th Infantry, in that order would go. Well, I don't know if 82nd or 101st, but that's what they told us. You're going after the Airborne, and so I was ready, you know. I mean, I signed up to serve, and that's exactly what I was meant, you know, what I was going to do. And I was supposed to be getting out in December. This is November, and so man, December 7th, I got my walking papers. I said goodbye. I never looked back. So you know, it had some advantages being at peacetime.
Yeah.
Now, as you come out of the military and you started growing and you started becoming more and more aware. Was writing a book ever a part of your plan? Did you dream of that, or did you just wake up one day and say, I'm going to write a book?
It wasn't. I didn't see myself as a writer. I had, after the military, I served 25 years as a graphic designer. I went to art school and became a designer, and I had a partnership with other guys, and then I got my own business, and at the I don't know, maybe with the early 80s, I decided I wanted to go back to college and earn a university degree. At that time, I just had an AA associate degree, and so I went back and earned my BA, and then I earned an MA from the University of Denver, and did an internship at the Denver Art Museum, and then went to work for the Colorado Historical Society as a director of design there. And I decided, well, this is really what I really want to do. I want to work in museums, and part of that, after while I was at the Historical Society, I was elected to the National American Association of Museums Board of Directors, and going to the conventions of the museums every year. I mean, there were something like 5,000 attendees at these conventions, and museum professionals, all, curators, administrators, directors, trustees, that sort of thing. And can you imagine that, to my surprise, I guess, there were only a handful of people of color.
Mm-hmm.
5 of us Latinos that used to hang around together. This is 5 out of 5,000.
0.01%.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I decided, we had got to do something about this. And at that time, there were a couple of models for what I had in my mind at that time. I decided I wanted to do a Latino museum here in Denver. And at that time, there was a museum, a Mexican museum in San Francisco. There was one in New York, Museo del Barrio. There was one in Chicago. There was a cultural center. And that was it. So I had no money, I had no collection of any kind, and no idea really how to, well, a vague idea of how to run a museum from my internships. But I told my wife I was going to quit my job and start a museum, and she thought, "Hey, man, you're crazy. How are you going to do this?" And but anyway, she supported me. She had a good job with the city of Denver at that time, and so she supported me while I pursued my quixotic dream. But I founded the Museo de las Americas here in Denver, and started out with a little one-room operation on Santa Fe Drive, and slowly through my networks with the Denver Art Museum and the Colorado History Museum, I gained some credibility and started to get some grants and some money in, and built the museum in 12 years into a nationally recognized organization.
Wow.
We did, while I was director, I did 42 exhibits showcasing the art, history, and culture of all of Latin America. And because I wanted people to know that we were not just, Chicanos, not just part of the Chicano movement. We were not just immigrants from Mexico. We had a proud history and culture.
We're contributors.
Culture, yeah, going way, way back, thousands of years in the New World. So that's what I was attempting to showcase, and I thought I did a very good job of establishing the Museo. I wanted to build something that would continue to exist after I was no longer part of it. And that happened in 2003. That was kind of a perfect storm for nonprofits, small nonprofits, because we were having difficulty tapping our usual stream of resources, foundations principally, and corporations here in Denver. That was right after 9/11 happened, and there was an economic downturn in the country, and all of the foundations were channeling their resources to New York, to help recover from 9/11. So I thought, well, I'm going to run for city council. Maybe I can leverage some money from the city for that, because the city was really focused on subsidizing the big four, they were called at that time. It was the Denver Art Museum, the Museum of Nature and Science, Botanic Gardens, and one other one I forget at the moment. But I ran for city council, and unfortunately there were 7 of us running in District 9, and it was a real free-for-all.
Cutthroat.
Yeah. So I ended up coming in third out of the field of 7, and I didn't get that. So I retired from professional life at that time, and that's when I got this opportunity to do the fellowship and write the book, The Color of Duty. I had done some writing while I was director of the Museo, for our newsletter, articles and essays for our exhibitions and for our newsletter, and so I thought, I got a little bit of a talent for this, and I think I should do more of it. So.
Man, I think the book's beautifully written, by the way. I think the way you laid out the story, I think you've made it personalized. You talked about when they were growing up and working in the fields, and just the family matters that were going on. It was just, I love that you humanized these heroes, man. I love that. I just wanted to point that out. Guys, before I forget, I want to make sure and do a station check-in. You are watching the Weekend Boost on KUHS The Stream, or if you're listening, we welcome you. We're so glad and honored to have you all on board. We are talking to Jose Aguayo. He is the author of the book, The Color of Duty. And he is also the curator. What was the term? Of the Museo de los Americas?
The founder and director.
The founder and director. This is the founder and director of the Museo de las Americas. And where is that located?
It's at 861 Santa Fe Drive.
So guys, show up at this 861 Santa Fe Drive. Go there. Look at the beautiful displays. I honestly haven't been there, but I will be there. I will be going there, and reading this book has just really been, I just felt a sense of honor and pride. I felt like I had just read Victor Señor's book. There are more Latinos per capita who have gotten medals of honor than any other ethnic group. Is that the case? Have you heard that?
That's correct, yeah.
Yes.
And Latinos are considered one of the most decorated ethnic groups in the military.
Yet we're a small group.
Yeah, there were 500,000 Latinos that served in World War II, and a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
That's a small number when you consider the entire number of people that are soldiers that served in World War II. But 500,000 out of the Latino population at that time was a big number.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's so many stories in this book. Was there any story? There's amazing recounts of experiences and battle scenes. And was there some part of this book that really stuck out to you, or that really had a lot of emotional draw for you?
They all did, mostly, but there's probably 4 of the stories that really hit home for me. One of them was the story of Furtado. He was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division, served in the 504th that I also served in many years later. But his story was really something. This man did all 4 combat jumps that the 82nd did in World War II, and survived, to come back from that. But it was an interesting story because one of the jumps that he did was in Holland during an operation called Market Garden, and the 82nd was tasked with capturing 2 bridges over the river Wall so that the British tankers and their foot soldiers could come up this road to capture the town of I forgot the name of the town right now, but this town, if they captured it, would allow them to move into Germany from the top, instead of having to go down through the underside where they were heading from after the landing in Normandy. But anyway, the 82nd had a difficult time capturing the bridge at first. So one battalion that Furtado was a part of was ordered to cross this river in canvas boats. There were 400 of them, and go to the opposite end of the bridge and try to capture it from there. So they went into just a hailstorm of bullets and mortar fire, and only half of them made it across. And El Hurtado was one of the ones that did. His boat was blowing up, but it was close to the opposite shore, and he managed to make his way to the shore, and even though he was wounded at that time, he picked up a weapon that belonged to somebody else, and he and his company commander and one other paratrooper got onto the bridge, and his company commander spoke German, and they convinced 200 Germans defending the bridge to surrender. They convinced them that they were surrounded, there was no way they could win, and they surrendered. And Al only got a Bronze Star for this, and should have been, much more than that. But that action, that episode, was part of a movie that was made later called A Bridge Too Far.
Oh, wow.
Some of you may have seen that. But Al was one of those people that took part in that crossing of that river. And there was another one, Tony Lopez, who served with the 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment in the Pacific. And he took part in MacArthur's island hopping campaign from New Guinea going toward the Philippines, that MacArthur had vowed that he would return to liberate. And part of the last stages of that was the landing and the capture of the island of Corregidor that was at the mouth of the bay that led to Manila, the Philippines. And this was just a suicidal mission almost. The island was only very small, and paratroopers, need a certain amount of distance, in order to land safely. So they decided, usually we would jump in what they call sticks, or groups of men that might be a dozen or so, sometimes 20. But because the island was so short, they decided that they had to make 2 passes over the island, and they were jumping in groups of 6. And Tony Lopez was one of those jumpers. He relates how he was positioned to jump just behind a photographer that was supposed to take pictures of the battles as they were going on. And the photographer kind of froze in the door ahead of Tony, and you can't do that when you're jumping on this short distance. So Tony kicked him out of the door and then followed him out, and he landed on Corregidor with his parachute caught at the top of a small tree. His legs could not quite touch the ground, and he was waiting there thinking, oh man, I'm going to get killed here. And he waited, and then he saw a helmet come up out of the brush, and he pulled out his .45. He was ready to kill this person. Turned out it was this photographer, and
oh man!
And he was able to cut him down, so he continued. But Tony also performed a heroic act during the battle. One of his the members of his platoon was wounded by some Japanese, and he was out there calling for help, and nobody wanted to move out and get him. So Tony got another one of his buddies, and they grabbed the wire springs from a cot, from the hospital cot that was there, and they went out, put this man on the springs, and brought him back safely. But in the meantime, Tony was shot through the hip with a Japanese rifle, and his wound got infected. He had to spend a little bit of time in the hospital before he went back on active duty. And then, of course, there was the Vietnam veterans. I didn't have this man's story in my book, but I did mention him. It was a soldier named Losada, who was a member of the 182nd Airborne Parachute Infantry Regiment, and they were in an effort to try to capture this one hill, and he was what they call a point man, and as he was going along, there was a company of North Vietnamese soldiers that came up out of the brush, and they were ready to cut his unit off from the main part of the unit. So his unit was told to withdraw. They were ordered to withdraw, and he knew that, you know, if they did that, you know, there was going to be nobody left, you know, to stop the North Vietnamese from overrunning his company. So he told them to go, and he stayed and killed 20 of the attackers, and kept firing his gun until he was out. And he thankfully did receive a Congressional Medal of Honor, you know, right away. But that's just some many episodes of heroism that Latinos performed, and a lot of times they were either unrecognized or they were given lesser medals, you know, than they deserved. But it's just part of what I was trying to convey in this book, you know, that we were overlooked, and it was time to give us some recognition.
Yeah. You know, just as you were talking, I was thinking Pito Ortega, he passed away, but man, he was a Medal of Valor winner and a Medal of Honor winner, and, you know, unrecognized. Fred Lopez, he was one of my friends I worked with many years, Vietnam veteran, hero. There's so many that are unsung, that will never get their award, that did great things behind the lines and behind closed doors that we'll never know. Yeah. And so it's just an honor, you know. It's really just amazing that.
I need to correct you on one thing. A lot of people talk about a Congressional Medal of Honor winner.
It's not a winner. I'm sorry, forgive me.
A recipient.
Recipient, yes. It's not a winner. He didn't want that medal.
It wasn't a contest.
I apologize. Yeah, that was a poor choice of words. But yes, it's really something that I don't know. Latinos just stand up. They step up, and they're not afraid of, you know, whatever. You know, there's just no fear. And I remember being a young GI, and, you know, I was in the combat unit, and we were always playing war games, and, you know, it was always, hey, you got to do what you got to do, you know, the job got to get done, and that's, you know, that's how we operated, you know, and the 1st and 10th Infantry, that was what we did, you know.
Yeah. That's one of the things I've stressed whenever I talk to groups, that Latinos have always had a strong tradition of in their families of serving in our nation's military. You can go into many Latino homes and see a whole wall full of pictures of people that have served in several wars. I just did an extension of an exhibit at the Colorado History Museum that talked about one such family, the Martinez family from Fort Collins. But they had the father, the patriarch of the family, served in World War I. He had 2 sons that served in World War II. He had another son that served in the Korean War, and 2 sons that served during Vietnam.
Man.
5 members of this family served in the military. And it wasn't a question of, you know, whether I should or shouldn't. You knew that it was your duty to do that.
Absolutely. That's why you signed up, you know. And I remember thinking so many times, you know, because we were always this country is always on the brink of war, it seems, and I would always lay there in my cot and just think, you know what, I'm gonna do what I gotta do, you know. I mean, it's like, what happens if, and it's like, well, you're gonna do what you're trained to do, you know. And it just gives me it makes me feel really warm in my heart to know that, you know, hey, we're the guys you can count on, you know. I remember my mom telling me when I was a kid, Hito, you're gonna have a tough time in this world, you know, because there's a lot of people that don't like you for one reason or another, and, you know, you might have to work twice as hard to get half the credit. And I realized that was probably partially, if not all the way true, you know. So when I joined the Army, I ran everywhere. when you came out of the Army, were you, you were a young buck, you were ready to go out and change the world? What was your mindset then? What did you think you were going to do? Or
to me, it was just another stage in my life. I did that, I fulfilled my duty, and I was focused on going to art school at that time.
Yes.
So I just, when I got out in July of 1962, I just spent 2 months getting reacquainted with my parents and trying to better their life a little bit. I installed a bathroom in their house. We had never had a bathroom all the time I was growing up, and applied to work at the sugar factory in Ovid, Colorado. Everybody in that region did that at one time in their life. And they sent me a card, telling me that I had been hired and to report. But at that time, it was time to report to the art school. So I came to Denver in September of that year, and I never looked back. That was just another stage in this blueprint for my life, I think. So.
Mm-hmm. But you've never taken a class on writing a book. You've never been trained in that. You took it upon yourself.
That's right. I had one class in undergraduate college that was a creative writing class, but that's it, one class.
Mm. Yeah, and that was me. I didn't have any training background. I just said, you know what, I'm going to write a book. It was like one word. I tell people every I always ask my guests, if there was one bit of advice you could give someone who's thinking about writing a book, what would that be?
You're asking me?
Yes, I'm sorry, forgive me.
Yeah. I like to say, the old adage is that, everybody has at least one story in them, your own biography. And when I started writing, my brother, who had also written a book, told me, what you need to have is discipline,
Mm-hmm.
You need to just sit down every day, even if you just write one page a day, but have the discipline to continue and see it through. And that's what I've been doing. See?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's discipline. It's just doing consistent writing every day.
Right.
And pretty soon you got a book. And guys, I'm not kidding you. This is not a book that would have been easy to write, because there's so much research that went into this, and we're talking about 262 pages of seriously awesome details of heroes, real true heroes in our country's history that have truly, made an impact and made a difference in people's lives and saved numerous lives. And this is the book that really talks about them.
You mentioned earlier one thing that I think is true, that the idea of writing a book and then getting it published, that's I don't know any of you that have ever done serious writing. The proper way to do that is to get an agent, and then you submit your manuscripts to well-known publishers, and eventually, maybe after several rejections, you might get published. Well, present day, there's another avenue for those of us that are still considered amateurs, and that is to self-publish your book, and that's what I did with mine. I self-published it, and that's why it's only available, through me, not through bookstores. And although I did have it at the Tattered Cover bookstore for a while here in Denver.
So that's another thing I definitely want to point out is if you are an author, if you have a newly published book, you got to get it in the Tattered Cover. I've read that over and over about writing a book, getting it in the Tattered Cover, especially if you're local. It's really easy to get in as a local author. They're going to check your manuscript to make sure that it's acceptable. But I was very easy to get my book in there, and I got to get it in again because I don't have it in there now. But so if someone wanted to get a copy of your book, they could get a hold of you, or they could get a hold of us through the station. 303-255-0567 is the number to the station here. If you are interested in getting a copy of this book, and you need to get a copy of this book, please reach out to us, because we definitely want to put you in touch with Jose, and make sure that you are able to get your copy, because this is really something that not just goes on your coffee table, but something that you can pick up and really read through and get a glimpse of what some of these people's lives were like. And I mean, one guy was, picking beets in the field one day, and he's at the AFI station to join the military the next, catching the bus from Rifle to Colorado, to Denver. It's like, I remember so much of these little things as you talked about that. It was like, oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, so it was being a veteran, I think it had a lot more appeal to me. But I mean, don't get me wrong, the stories are entertaining. It flows very nicely, very, very well written. I mean, really a great work of art, and something that's a legacy that I think really is worth sharing. I mean, truly.
One more thing I'd say about the stories in the book, as you know, being in the military also, what you know while you're in the military is what's happening within your own little world. Your squad, your platoon, your company maybe. Rarely ever do you know anything about what's happening at the battalion level, the regimental level, the division level, the overall planning, of everything. And that's one thing I was able to do in this book. I had the kernel of a story through the interviews with these veterans, but they just knew what was happening around them. They didn't know the big picture, what was happening in the world at that time, what was happening at that stage in time with the war in the Pacific and in Europe.
Wow.
So I was able to do research and add all of that contextual information for them that made their story much broader than it would have been otherwise.
Yes, very fluid. I mean, it was so connected. I mean, it was easy to read book. I don't care what page you pick it up to, even if you pick it up in the middle of a story. I mean, you can really follow along. I mean, there's titles: Serving in Two Wars, Fighting in the 4F Division. There's just so many examples of people's lives, bullets and barbering. I mean, the stories are, I noticed a lot of them went to the conservative, what was it, the CCC?
Yeah, that's true. The Second World War veterans, one of the first things they did, this was right at the last part of the Depression, so there were no jobs, no opportunities for anything for Latinos especially. So one thing they could do was join the various social progress programs that Franklin Roosevelt, the president, implemented. One of those was the Civilian Conservation Corps, and that was especially widespread here in the West. So a lot of these veterans would join that, and it was pretty much a military atmosphere at that time. You were issued uniforms, you lived in barracks, you ate in mess halls, you were commanded by a regular Army officer, even though you were not yet in the military. So that there a lot of the World War II veterans in my book did that as a beginning, and then they went from there into the regular military.
Yeah, that was interesting, because I remember hearing little bits and pieces of that, as a kid. My mom would talk a little bit about it, and when I came across it, it's like, oh yeah, I remember, hearing about this. So
CCC, yeah.
Yeah, and it was very active. It was very productive, and it really pulled a lot of people out from starvation, literally.
Absolutely, and it wasn't a whole lot of money. They weren't paid very much, but they were able to save or send a little bit of their money to their families, to help them out. $5 in those days went a long way. For those of you that are enjoying our national park system, all of the national forests, trails in the national forest, those were all built originally by the CCC, by people that worked during the Depression in that program.
We're down to about maybe 11, 12 minutes left in the show. I want to talk a little bit more about the Museo. This was no small feat. I mean, to start a museum is not like, opening a bookstore. This was a challenge. I mean, you must have had all kinds of obstacles.
Oh, no question. It's first of all, you had to get a facility. You had to get enough money, to hire staff. You had to start either organizing exhibits yourself, or getting onto the list of traveling exhibits that the Smithsonian, for example, had. But yeah, it was a real challenge in the early years. You know, many times I was practically at the point of tears, you know, in trying to get an exhibit installed, where I had to do the painting the gallery and getting it ready, and framing the pictures if there were some, and getting everything ready to go. And I had no marketing help, no fundraising help, so it was difficult in the beginning. And I worked without a salary, as my wife will tell you, for several months. And as I said, luckily she had a good paying job, and she spent 25 years as a physician's assistant for Denver Health. It was Denver Health Authority now, Denver Health and Hospitals then. But she was a physician assistant, a child health associate, they called it at that time, in pediatrics. So she was doing all the work that a regular doctor would do, but not getting paid what a regular doctor would. But it was enough for us to survive, and eventually I got enough grants and enough money coming in that I was able to hire a marketing person, and then an education person, an exhibit designer, and a few things that really helped out. But when I first started the museum, and we were on Santa Fe Drive in a one-room portion of a cabinet shop that belonged to a businessman at that time, a contractor named E.T. Lepore. He let me have, he was scaling down his cabinet shop at that time, and he let me have the front room that used to be his office to start the museum.
Wow.
And the back part of it was still an active cabinet shop, although scaling down a bit. But I used to have to come in the morning and blow the sawdust off my papers before I got started.
Wow.
For the day. But it was a big help. E.T. Lepore was an important part of me getting started. He had his offices right next door, and he was still active in those offices for probably the first 5 or 6 years that I had the museum, before he also retired and went into doing other things. But it was difficult, and again, as I said, I had a lot of help from my networks that I had established at the Denver Art Museum and the Museum of the History Museum and the Museum of Nature and Science. Some of those people served on my board of directors, and they were able to lend us small parts of their exhibits, and eventually we started to build our own collection. I had a couple of important negotiations I was especially proud of. One was a couple that lived in California. The man, Irving Dragon, was a retired member of the State Department. He had been not an ambassador, but just below ambassadorships to several countries in Latin America. And in his travels, he and his wife had collected a fair amount of folk art, Latin American folk art, and they were looking for a place to house this collection. They no longer had any place to put it themselves except in storage. So I met with them in California, and was able to convince them that the Museo was the proper place to donate this collection to, and they did so, along with an endowment to maintain the collection that is supposed to come due when the couple dies. The wife, who was really the key person in getting the collection to the Museo, passed away some 6-7 years ago, maybe more. And Irving Dragon just celebrated his 100th birthday, so
wow.
He's still around for a little bit, I think. But when he dies, then that endowment will come to the Museo, and they'll have a several $1 million a nest egg, you know, to help stabilize the museum. Then I was able to get another collection of PreColumbian art from Retha Bloodworth, a former employee of the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and she had a very small but very nice collection of PreColumbian artifacts, and I got those to the museum. And little by little we got quite a few things until we have a pretty respectful size exhibit at the Museo now that can be used, you know, to present our own exhibits and also lend some things out. We at one time brought in a collection of the drawings of Diego Rivera, a very famous Mexican muralist, and we had those on exhibit at the museum. His granddaughter came and did a presentation about her grandfather, and we were able to keep those drawings, and then we traveled them to other museums, small museums in the country. So the Museo today is a well-respected member of the local museum community, and hopefully it'll continue for a long time.
And that is 861 Santa Fe, guys. If you're out and about and you want to do something great, go check out this museum. I will be there this week. I guarantee you, we will be there making a stop in, and I want to go see. Just, you know, I mean, I think it's wonderful to have some cultural record, you know, and it's nice to be able to see that put in a building that we can actually see and, you know, and really get the sense of, especially, but, you know, I mean, your historical research definitely speaks for itself, you know, and so, I mean, to start a museum, that's vision, man.
Yeah, I've been called a visionary. I've also been called other things, less complimentary, but yeah, it was quite a thing. I'm proud of that.
Mm-hmm. Is there a fee to get in the museum?
Yes, there is, but it's not a great deal of money. I think it's something like $4 now
Man, guys,
to get in.
You got to go to this museum. Go and support this cause. It's a worthy cause. It's something that it's really important for us to know our history. It's important for us to know, you know, who we really are, and you know, there's things about our history that we really need to know and share, you know, and I think that having a museum is just a great, you know, avenue to express those belongings, that history, you know.
Yeah.
As I've gotten older, I've learned a lot more about the history of the United States, and I've learned about, you know, Chicano Latino history, and you know, being in this position here, I've had the opportunity to, you know, to interview so many authors who have talked about these histories. You know, Virginia Sanchez was such a, and she, you know, her book on Colorado history was just, and the title slips in my mind right now, but excellent read. I keep it, you know, handy because I always go and refer to it, especially if I'm in an argument and someone says something, here's proof, you know. But yeah, I mean, these men truly served with honor. They served with dignity, and you know, this is worthy of taking a look at this book, The Color of Duty. As far as you out there who are considering writing a book, I've told you before, I'm going to tell you again, it starts with page 1. Get that tablet out and start typing. And you might throw a page away, start again. I mean, when I was writing my book, I wrote 20 pages, and I'd sometimes throw them away because I wasn't satisfied with it. And in the end, the book was written, you know, and it was complete, and a meaningful read that's got so much detail in it, so much useful information. Again, the Museo de las Americas is at 861 Santa Fe, and it's a very nominal fee to get in there. Well worth your time, well worth your money. This book, The Color of Duty, available through Jose. If you'd like to reach out to Jose through the station, you can reach out to us. We would be happy to put you in touch with Jose. Worthwhile read, guys. Worthwhile read.
They could also send me an email if they'd like, and if they're interested in a book, and that is Jose this is all lowercase, JOSEAGUAYO 601 @gmail.com.
And in the meantime, put that 861 Santa Fe in your GPS and make sure you get yourself out there. Guys, support this cause. It's worthy, it's meaningful, and these historical pieces of information that you get that will last a lifetime. Guys, I'm about out of time. I'm just so honored to have you all as our viewing audience and listening audience, and we're grateful for you. I always close out my show with this statement, and I believe it firmly. Everybody's looking for a hero, and if you can't find one, be one. Thank you so much, Jose, for being a hero. Thank you
very much.
Your service is greatly appreciated, and all that you do, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about these Latinos.
Yes.
As you said, that served and deserve recognition for what they did.
Absolutely, absolutely. Guys, see you in 2 weeks. Look forward to it. Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
Arguello,
Hello.
how you been, brother?
Good. How about you?
It's been a while.
How you doing, Paul?
How you doing, Lee?
Good, man.
Good. We got 1 hour. Get in and do it.
Get out.
Do you remember me, Paul Chavez?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
How you doing? It's been a long time, like you said.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Last time I saw you, you were in a bolo tie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That must have been a long time ago.
Yeah, it was in the 70s. No, it was... You know my brother, Dan Uliberry, right? Remember Dan Uliberry from
Yes,
Sad?
Yeah.
We just lost him.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he passed away about a year ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He used to work here with us. Pretty successful show and everything.
That's too bad. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, he was pretty active in the community.